But it cannot be denied that the strength of this album is not in the loudness of its screams or the heaviness of its riffs, but in the addiction-forming nature of its songwriting. Hello everyone, and welcome back to DFT'S Dungeon. My name is Daniel Terry, and I realized just after I finished my Zayo video at the end of December that I totally forgot to do an Underoath video in 2024, so we're going to still get it, but it's going to be a little bit late here in 2025, since I decided that it was finally time to dig into Underoath's breakthrough album, They're Only Chasing Safety. Now, once we get into the album deep dive, you might end up thinking, man, this guy is like a total stan for Chasing Safety era Underoath, but not everything is as it may seem. Now, I don't really need to give a full history of Underoath here because I basically did that on my last Underoath video, but the short version is this. At the time They're Only Chasing Safety came out in 2004, I'd only been listening to the band for maybe a couple of years at that point, like 2 years max, I would think, and the Underoath that I knew and loved did a whole lot more stuff that sounded like this versus stuff that sounded like this.
12th and high on a Sunday, feeling like we're gold.
And like most teenagers who were just getting into heavy music, for me at the time, heavier and less commercial was always better. It's almost like the tastes of a band's target audience back then were always at extreme odds with the goals of up-and-coming bands who were trying to gain a bigger and bigger audience with every release. So when I heard the news that half the band had been replaced between the release of The Changing of Times and They're Only Chasing Safety, and that one of those replaced members was Dallas Taylor, the lead vocalist of the band, I was pretty taken aback. I was kind of surprised by that. And for some reason, any uncertainty with member changes at that time manifested itself as negative feelings towards the band or negative feelings towards whatever this new record was going to be. And this was further complicated by the fact that the song Reinventing Your Exit had either been leaked or released by the band prior to the official release of the album. I don't really remember how I got a hold of that one. Hopefully it was like on the up and up. But I remember listening to that thing and thinking, oh my God, what happened to these guys? And I got like really up in my feelings about it. And I would end up saying things like, man, Dallas was like so much better than this Spencer guy. Old Underoath was just better. It just hit different, you know? And it's funny because I think if I had actually listened to Spencer's previous band, This Runs Through, before hearing this record, I probably would have been way more hyped up about it than I was. Instead, I just decided that I was going to like not like it no matter what, which was kind of my default back in the day. It was just this like selfishness that I felt as a teenager where like, I don't know if you can relate to this or not, but at the time I just wanted to keep every band like personal just for myself and my own enjoyment, and like it can't be enjoyed by anybody else. So the thought of like the band being enjoyed at large by people that I might not even like was just absolutely terrifying to me, which is why it's so weird that once I had decided, you know, that I felt that way about it, that I ended up buying They're Only Chasing Safety when it came out anyway. Maybe it was boredom, or I had some like money burning a hole in my pocket, or maybe I just had this sense of wanting to collect every single record that I could from Solid State back in the day. But I think the real reason that I bought it was because deep in my gut, I realized something that I wasn't ready to outwardly admit. And that thing is that They're Only Chasing Safety.
It's good. It's good. It's good.
So let's dive into this thing track by track, just like I always do. But if you don't feel like going track by track, I totally get it. There's timestamps down below if you just want to skip right to my final thoughts. But for everyone else, let's jump into this album. They're Only Chasing Safety starts off with this banging song called Young and Aspiring. And the song kind of just fades in at first, but once it gets going, you get the full dose of what this album is going to offer you. Spencer's screams cut in loud and fast, and he's screaming in a really high pitch, very similar to what Dallas was doing on the past albums. And you hear those keyboards come in and those melodic guitars. And overall, for the first 38 seconds of the song, we feel comfortable because this is the Underoath that we all grew to love on The Changing of Times. However, at 39 seconds, the song sort of shifts into Aaron and Spencer trading off singing. And then it kind of settles into this like really catchy chorus that took me totally by surprise the first time I heard it. The most engaging part of this song and this album in particular is how it's dripping with energy. So many bands always feel the need to kind of slow the pace of the song down in order to introduce a chorus, but Underoath is able to kind of pull this off without a hitch. Even if the tempo is slower on the chorus, it doesn't ever feel slower, if that makes sense.
That didn't make any sense!
And this album actually gets better from here. A Boy Brushed Red, Living in Black and White turns the previous song's formula on its head, at least in the beginning, because it starts off slower with clean singing, and you can tell that the band spent a good amount of time trying to make the vocal dynamics actually interesting on this album. A lot of pre-2004 metalcore bands were really guilty of just kind of screeching over riff in whatever which way just came out of them on the first take. But on this record, Underoath really spent some time working on the vocal patterns to match the screams to the riffs in a really satisfying way. And lyrically, this song's really interesting because it deals with more risque subject matter that we weren't really used to hearing from Underoath. And while the lyrics on their previous album, The Changing of Times, were certainly emotional and introspective, A Boy Brushed Red, Living in Black and White is a more straightforward song about two young people engaging in premarital intercourse, which might not sound that risque on the surface, but for a Christian hardcore band back in 2004, it was pretty taboo. However, the honest and straightforward nature of the lyrics was pretty refreshing to me. Like, for me personally, these kinds of lyrics are awesome because I can clearly and easily discuss what a song's about without having to throw up like 12 disclaimers beforehand. This song is so musically catchy that during my first listen back in 2004, I thought, man, this has got to be the single for this album because it doesn't get any more earwormy than this. At least that's what I should have said, but I probably said something like, ew, choruses and singing and blah, right? But in all seriousness, look, Young and Aspiring was great. And the part of me that only wanted heavy Underoath at the time preferred that song to A Boy Brushed Red. But it cannot be denied that the strength of this album is not in the loudness of its screams or the heaviness of its riffs, but in the addiction-forming nature of its songwriting. Up next is The Impact of Reason, which is a mostly screamed song with another really nice chorus. And while I don't think this song quite reaches the heights of some of the heavier hitters on this album, I still really like it. There's this melodic break about 2 minutes in that always makes me feel really good. And then Spencer starts screaming, I feel like this is going nowhere, which is kind of how I feel most of the time when I'm writing these video scripts. Something to point out here too, though, is that I really love the way Spencer's voice sounds on this album. And I'm not going to make some grand statement about which vocalist is better, but let's just say for this style of music, Spencer's voice really works well here. And I'm not sure if it was production or mixing or whatever, but his voice comes through really full and thick on this recording in a way that the vocals really never had on any Underoath album before that. Now, speaking of heavy hitters on this album, Reinventing Your Exit is track number 4, and this was the first song released before this album came out, unless you count that demo version of Young and Aspiring that was on the band's website for a few months. But this song is the one that gave us the first taste of what They're Only Chasing Safety was going to be like. And honestly, this single threw me before I'd heard it in the context of the rest of the album, because I was almost certain that Underoath was going to make like a full-on pop rock band after this. Because I remember after we heard the song, me and my buddies would jokingly refer to them as Taking Back Underoath. Because, I mean, at the time, that's basically the only thing we had to compare it to. And thankfully, that didn't end up being the case at all. Reinventing Your Exit is a mostly clean-sung song with a strong, infectious chorus with Spencer and Aaron trading off constantly.
This is the way.
And of course it works, just like it worked on the 3 songs before it. And it works on, 4 more songs after it. I really like the electronic effects and the keyboards in this song. I think it really, really brings the entire thing together.
That rug really tied the room together, did it not?
The next track is a short interlude track that is less than a minute long, but there really isn't much to say about it. It's just there and then it's gone, right? Track 6 is one of the most popular Underoath songs of all time, called It's Dangerous Business Walking Out Your Front Door. And it's notable to me for the way that it combines conventional and unconventional song structures together so successfully. I mean, on paper, it sounds like a car wreck. Well, wait. I mean, you know what? I'm keeping it. I'm just going to double down. It's a car wreck musically and lyrically. It opens with Spencer screaming, which we're used to by this point, but just 16 seconds in, the music cuts down to drums and keyboards, with Spencer yelling over it until Aaron fades in and introduces what will eventually turn into the chorus of this song. After that, we shift into what we think is going to be a predictable song structure, but then it shifts again, and we're listening to a choir singing Drowning in My Sleep with Spencer shrieking over it. The creativity in the songwriting is incredible. And it wasn't really until I started putting this video together that I realized that. While I have loved this record for over 20 years now, I've really taken for granted just how strong the songwriting truly is. But seriously, if you read the lyrics, they are actually kind of messed up if you really try to interpret them literally. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Downset Go is next, and it's one of my favorite songs on this album. I love the heavy screamed intro mixed with these super poppy, upbeat guitars and vocals. And there's this really nice melodic break 2 minutes and 20 seconds in that always has a calming effect on me. Until it all just breaks apart at the 3-minute mark. And it's just another really solid track here. And I feel like this album really picks up momentum in its later half. I Don't Feel Very Receptive Today is up next, and it's all killer, no filler from start to finish. This song stays punchy and screamy throughout and features a really cool spaz out moment at 2 minutes and 6 seconds in. And this is probably the hardest song on this album. Something that I criticized Underoath's last album, The Changing of Times, for was that it struggled with maintaining a coherent mood and feel throughout each song. On that record, the band would play a melodic, poppy-sounding part and then stop and then go into some death metal riff. And then back to what they were playing before again, and it was just all over the place. And in contrast, on Chasing Safety, Underoath has finally figured out how to make a song heavier than the rest of the songs without completely changing the vibe of the album to pull it off. Track 9 is called I'm Content with Losing, and it's my personal favorite song on this album. As a penultimate track, it contains every single element that we have encountered on this album dialed up to 10. Musically, the song stays upbeat and punchy with another combination of traditional song structures mixed with non-traditional song structures. And there's not a lot of bands that can have seemingly stream of consciousness song structures and a chorus that sticks in your head. My favorite part of this song, though, is the last minute or so, where vocally it sounds like Aaron and Spencer are racing each other to the end of the song. Spencer's screams are really intense, and I just love how very extra it is here. I love it. It's just a shrieking good time. Some Will Seek Forgiveness, Others Escape ends the album off slow, and is really the first and only chill out moment on this record, if we don't include the Blue Note. And I thought it was super cool hearing Aaron Marsh from Copeland singing on it. And I thought this song was neat because it's mostly rooted in this electronic drum beat, and yet it still somehow fits the vibe of this album, which was, a little bit more guitar heavy, right?
I heard a voice through the discord of a day.
And I'm not going to lie, I usually skip this song when I'm listening to this album. And it's a really nice end cap to the album, but I'm personally not a huge fan of introducing screaming into a soft song in the last minute and a half. But it's just personal preference talking. I don't particularly love it when any band adds screamed vocals into a softer album ender. But overall, though, I feel like the song is super, super effective at sort of, again, ending the album off on a more emotional and introspective note. And that, my friends, is They're Only Chasing Safety. And how do I feel about it after all these years? Honestly, still feels pretty great to listen to. I feel like this album would have impacted me more on a personal level, though, if it had come out in like 2002 versus 2004. See, 2004 was my senior year of high school, and while I definitely could relate to some of the melodrama of the lyrics, I was kind of starting to approach a slightly higher level of maturity. And honestly, that is exactly what this album did for Underoath as a band and as a brand. Last year, I criticized the band's previous album, The Changing of Times, for not changing enough. The band would try to push into a new direction on that record, but then they would frequently run back into the safety of their past work when things got too uncomfortable. But on They're Only Chasing Safety, Underoath was able to finally push forward into that new territory and leave the past behind. And this newfound confidence in their sound would allow them to release bolder and even more mature albums in the future. The breakthrough success of this album would end up making Underoath into one of the most successful bands to ever come out of this scene. And that about wraps up this week's video, guys. Do you guys agree with my takes on this album? Do you disagree? What are your takes about They're Only Chasing Safety? Leave them in the comments below. If you guys like the channel, please consider subscribing to it. This podcast also has a Discord server, if you guys didn't know. I'll leave a link to that in the show notes of this video. You should come over there and say hi sometimes. I'll see you guys again soon. Thanks.